I read in Scripture yesterday what I think at first blush has got to be the easiest command in all the Bible to follow. Let me read it for you. It's found in Romans chapter 14. And it says that each one of us should be fully convinced in his own mind. Is there anything easier to do today than to be fully convinced in our own mind that we are right in our views and attitudes towards certain things? I think especially of the elections right now, where everybody is fully convinced in his own mind that their view of things is the right view of things. The elections, Donald Trump is sort of a litmus test for everybody, knowing that they have the perfect view of the situation. I think in general there are three camps. There's the no possible way I can vote for Trump camp. They look at him as a person and his character flaws and personality, and they say that character is destiny, and therefore I cannot vote for the person no matter how much I like his policy. Then there's the hold my nose for Trump crowd who says you're not electing a pastor, you're electing a president, and it's not about the person, it's about the direction he wants to take the country. And they're fully convinced that that's the right approach. Then there's the camp, we might call this the acquired taste or admiration crowd. And these are people who really have come over time to admire Trump, to admire the fact that he says what he thinks freely. He doesn't self-censor himself the way so many of us do. We're always afraid that we might say something that's not quite acceptable or could be criticized. He speaks freely. He speaks like a normal person. They like his courage and his toughness and his willingness to fight. Okay, so every one of these groups of people is fully convinced in their own mind. Now, I belong to one of those camps, but I don't have anything more to add that you can't read about in any other place where people make their case and try to convince other people. My point today isn't so much about which camp I belong. It's to the reality of this scripture verse that each one of us should be fully convinced in his own mind. It seems just so easy, too easy, unless I'm taking it out of context, which I think I am. So when you read it in context, you find out that it's not such an easy command to follow. The context is Paul writing about how certain things divide people, and they're not in the category of right and wrong. They're more in the category of wise or foolish, or even more subtly, they're in the category of your conscience being liberated or constrained, a free conscience or a constrained one. This is sometimes called the weak conscience. In Paul's day, the arguments were about what meat you could eat and what holidays you would observe. Meat, think of it, most of the butchers in the ancient world worked at the temple. So you took your lamb to the temple, they slaughtered it, you took it home, you had a barbecue. Many of the ways that you ate meat in the ancient world then were done by priests or priests of different religions, and they were dedicated to the Lord or they were dedicated to idols, and behind idols are demons. And so there was a tremendous debate in the time of Paul whether Christians should eat meat that had been offered to idols, and it was very divisive. And some people said, well, meat is meat is meat is meat. It's just meat. God created the animal. It gives us to eat. Let's eat it. And others said, no, how can you eat meat that you're worshiping and inviting the demons into your life? We can't possibly do that. And Paul belonged to one of these camps. He really believed that his conscience was free to eat the meat. But he also said that we need to be sensitive to what other people's conscience is constraining them to do, and we must respect it and honor it and not knock the stuffing out of them concerning their own convictions. And there's lots of applications for this. Another one was holidays, which days you would celebrate. That was another issue in Paul's day, so that he would go on to say The one who observes the day observes it in honor of the Lord, and the one who eats, eats in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God, while the one who abstains, abstains in the honor of the Lord. In other words, there are some categories that are not right and wrong. They're free or constrained according to your own conscience. And some people have a conscience that says, I can enjoy this before the Lord and give him thanks for it. And others would say, no, I cannot do that and thank the Lord and feel good in my spirit towards him. And this is the dividing point. There's lots and lots of examples of this. A couple years ago, and maybe in an ongoing way, there's a debate over whether you should take a COVID shot. Some people feel free to do it. Others say, no, you're foolish if you do it. Halloween in my family was one of these areas. We grew up in a family where we did not really celebrate Halloween at all. We just ignored it because in many ways it seemed to me that Halloween was just connected to the dark side in ways that I felt very uncomfortable. And even though you could reduce it to kids dressed up as hobos or ballerinas or with a sheet over their head as a ghost or whatever, I just felt it was it's just too dark for me, and I didn't want to celebrate it. We had the same problem even with Christmas in our family. My conscience was more constrained in ways that almost everybody else in my life and around me felt I was kind of foolish and silly. But we didn't really set up little signs or decorations with Santa. We kept the focus more on Jesus, and we made sort of a conscious decision not to bring Santa into our Christmas time. Well, lots of other people kind of thought that was silly. They said, oh, there's nothing wrong with Santa, blah, blah, blah. And of course there isn't, except in my conscience, it just felt like I was stealing something away from the focus that should be on Jesus. And so I was constrained in my own conscience. And so I grew up, I raised my children in a home where we didn't really put much focus on Santa. These are things that friends of mine it made no sense to them. And yet it was me trying to follow my own conscience in this regard. In that regard, I had the weak conscience. I was not free to just reduce Santa to a celebration and a fun family thing. So I just had to follow my own conscience. And that's the call of Paul. He's saying we should be convinced in our own mind, which leads to a couple of conclusions. Number one, we ought not to be passing judgment on people when we're dealing with categories that are not moral in nature. We don't make things like this, food and holidays and how you do things, raise them up to the level of right and wrong. Paul says in verse 10 of this chapter, he says, why do you pass judgment on your brother? Meaning, know what category you're dealing with. If some people drink alcohol and others think it's wrong, don't pass judgment on one camp or the other. Find out which camp you belong to and follow your own conscience. That's the point of this kind of verse. So that's the second thing. Don't pass judgment and follow your own conscience. And if you don't, bad things happen. I will close with this very sad story that relates to our work. In fact, I would say, if we could convince people to follow their own judgment, their own conscience, and to live within the boundaries of their own conscience, we would probably cut abortion by 50% in the world overnight. Because most people who have abortions don't believe in them. They're compromising their own convictions to please others. Here's a testimony. My family would not support my decision to keep the baby. My boyfriend said he would give me no emotional or financial help whatsoever. All the people that mattered to me told me to abort. And when I said that I didn't want to, they started listing reasons why I should. That it would be detrimental on my life and career and on my health, and I have no social life and no future. I am so angry at myself for giving in to the pressure of others. This is a person who did not follow their own conscience. They yielded to the pressure, and the effect is to have the stuffing knocked out of them. Paul says a very challenging command that each one of us should live according to how his own mind and conscience is settled on the subject. And we do well to encourage people to follow their conscience, even if it leads them down a path that we're not ready to join them on. We're serving them well. And I want, over these elections and all these other issues, to really remind people that we love our neighbors well when we respect their own conscience and encourage them to stay within it. Thanks.